Welcome to MDOT in Motion. Our June edition is focusing on the Complete Streets Leadership Academy. We're going to begin in just a minute. While we have everyone here, please be advised that we are recording this webinar. Your mic and your cameras are turned off, but anything you put in the chat and the Q&A will be recorded, and we do plan on posting this webinar online. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, you can put them in our Q&A box. We will have questions at the end of the webinar after our presentations. Again, we'll give it one more minute for a few more people to join us, and then we'll get rolling. All right. So again, welcome everyone to our June edition of MDOT in Motion, our webinar series about active transportation and micromobility. This month, we're focused on our Complete Streets Leadership Academy and how we're taking that into the next phase at MDOT. So MDOT in Motion is a series of webinars, interactive activities, and educational opportunities offered by the Maryland Department of Transportation and our Office of Active Transportation and Micromobility. Through these educational offerings, we're hoping to highlight multimodal projects and programs. We're really trying to get more Marylanders moving, connecting people to jobs, schools, services, and each other through a complete transportation network that expands options for transit, biking, walking, rolling, and driving. The impact that we're hoping to have here is to support a more connected and sustainable transportation network, but also to translate some of our policies and our programs that can be deeply technical, but affect Marylanders' everyday lives. So helping people understand what MDOT does and the impact you will see on the roadways and in your communities. My name is Meg Young. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Active Transportation and Micromobility. I'm just running the slides and facilitating things today, and I'm joined by our Director, Candice Holford from MDOT. So our agenda for the day, Candice will get us started with a little bit about Complete Streets implementation, but then we have two exciting guest speakers talking about Smart Growth America's Complete Streets Leadership Academy report from last year's Quick Builds. And then we'll look at next steps with Maryland's Complete Streets Quick Build program presented by Shane Sarver. And again, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentations. So throughout the webinar, again, your cameras and your mics are turned off. But anything you put in the chat, we'll follow up on, and you can put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll have a Q&A period at the end of the presentations. So I'll hand it off to Candice to kind of set the stage.
Thanks, Meg. Good afternoon, everyone. As Meg mentioned, Candice Holford. I'm the Director of Active Transportation and Micromobility. I've seen you on this webinar series a handful of times, maybe 3 so far. So thanks for joining us today. I just wanted to tie things together in terms of what the Complete Streets Leadership Academy and the Quick Build projects mean in terms of Complete Streets implementation. So MDOT updated its Complete Streets policy in 2024, and we also released an implementation plan that said, well, how are we going to implement this policy? One of the things shown on the screen now is a list of action items, and one action item had to do with demonstration projects. So we as MDOT committed to delivering more test or demonstration pilot projects to try out some new things, collect the data, and use that to inform future work. So we are delivering on one of the action items in our Complete Streets implementation plan. Moving right along, so how are we delivering these demonstration projects? Through a program called the Complete Streets Quick Build program. This is Maryland's version of the Complete Streets Leadership Academy. MDOT is working with State Highway Administration to deliver this as a program. The purpose is to install and evaluate projects that improve safety for all users. What we benefit from in this sort of framework with a pilot program and this innovative partnering and collaboration framework, we get to try new designs. We get to work a little bit quicker on an accelerated timeline. We get to work with partners from the start that generally are often not brought in until a little bit later in the process. And then finally, we're collecting data from this innovative opportunity and using that data to inform how we design and construct projects in the future. So essentially tracking performance. So I'd quickly like to just introduce our speakers now. I'll read through their bios. First off, we have Ravina John, Senior Program Associate from Smart Growth America. Ravina is an urban planner at Smart Growth America, working to inform best practices and research and build local and state capacity and capture the ongoing story of complete streets. Prior to Smart Growth America, Ravina was a climate resilience fellow at the City of Boston and a civil engineer supporting flood resilience and stormwater management in the upper Midwest. Ravina enjoys reading, biking, and spending time outside. And then we also have Shane Sarver joining us. Shane is a transportation planner and strategic engagement support for the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, also referred to as SHA. Shane is a bicycle and pedestrian planner in the Office of Planning and Preliminary Engineering at SHA, where he works on the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, bicycle and pedestrian priority areas, and other bicycle and pedestrian safety programs. Prior to SHA, Shane was a multimodal planner at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. He has a master's in engineering from the University of Alabama at Birmingham and a bachelor's in political science from Salisbury University. So very well experienced, revered speakers here. I will kick it off by handing it to Ravina.
Thank you so much, Candice. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really excited to get to share about last year's Complete Streets Leadership Academy with Smart Growth America. So if we could go to the next slide a minute, I just want to do a quick background on Smart Growth America. We are a national nonprofit that envisions a country where no matter where you live or who you are, you can enjoy living somewhere that is healthy, prosperous, and resilient. We do this through research, advocacy, and direct support to communities, such as through this Complete Streets Leadership Academy program. I'm on the Thriving Communities team here at SGA, which means that most of my work focuses on complete streets, specifically technical assistance, helping cities and states across the US implement their complete streets policies, and building the relationships necessary for these successful outcomes. Next slide, please. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Complete Streets being part of this webinar, but I do want to step back and just make sure that we have a shared understanding of what this is. Complete streets are streets for everyone. This is an approach to planning, designing, building, and maintaining streets so that way they can work for people regardless of the mode that they use, providing safe, accessible, and convenient transportation for everyone. This approach also prioritizes the needs of those who have been historically disadvantaged by the transportation systems in the past. This includes the elderly, people who are use different mobility devices, as well as communities of color that have been cut off by highways in the past. Next slide, please. Complete Streets improves safety by changing behavior through design. By using strategies like the ones shown in these images, we can build spaces for people to walk and bike comfortably and safely. We can narrow lanes and change intersection configurations to slow drivers down, making places safer for people both inside and outside of cars. And we can add visual interest so that people navigating streets know to look out for each other, know to be careful that this is a shared space that we need to keep each other safe in. As you may notice, a lot of the images on this slide are not full construction projects, but rather temporary installation. And this gets me to the Complete Streets Leadership Academy. Next slide, please. So the Complete Streets Leadership Academy was a program to do these temporary installations, these quick build demonstration projects, to test temporary street designs, measure the impact of these projects, and incorporate feedback into those temporary designs. This program is a way to get near-term safety improvements on streets that really need it. We see across the US Many of the most dangerous streets are owned by states. They're like state DOT owned roads. And so getting safety improvements, especially for people walking on these streets, are imperative and urgent. And with the long timeline of planning full design and full construction projects, quick build demonstration projects are a great way to get near-term safety improvements in the places that it's really urgent. So with that in mind, this program was structured to bring together state DOT, SHA district offices, and local jurisdictions to do a temporary installation on a state-owned road in their communities. This could be a main street that is owned by a state. This could be a highway that's entering a city that turns into a main street. There are a lot of different places that these projects could be useful for. This program focuses on both safety improvements through these temporary projects and relationship building by bringing together staff from different districts of DOT, as well as bringing the local jurisdictions into the room. So we're building relationships kind of up and down and also across. There was a lot of peer learning opportunities by having this be a cohort model. The participants attended a series of virtual and in-person workshops over several months to learn some foundational skills around complete streets, to learn about how to develop and install a quick build demonstration project, and to share success with each other as the program continued. Each participant got to host their own in-person workshop, which was a really great way for the whole cohort to get to see the challenges and opportunities at each project site. And one of the key goals of this project is to do a temporary installation within each community. Next slide, please. There are a whole bunch of goals for these programs in addition to doing a quick build demonstration project. Obviously, we are looking to improve safety within the few short months that these projects happen. But we're also looking for cross-jurisdictional collaboration. We're looking for cities, counties, and towns to be able to learn best practices from each other. We're looking to build relationships between district DOT offices and the communities that they work with, bringing folks into the room together and putting a face to the names that you might see on some emails. These temporary projects are a great opportunity to try new designs or try new materials that might not have been used in other places in the state. And so the examples here that I'll show in a few minutes are strategies like speed cushions that hadn't been used in Maryland before, but through this program, we got to demonstrate their effectiveness, measure the speed impacts, and now they can be used with more certainty in other places. And then this program is designed to not be a one-off. We want this to be the start of a longer collaborative process. And so SGA is always looking for the barriers, but also the points that made this easier so that states and local jurisdictions can go on to do more quick build demonstration projects in the future. Next slide, please. The Maryland Complete Streets Leadership Academy from 2024 built on a lot of experience from SGA's prior leadership academies in the past. Most notably, in 2023, we worked with the states of Alaska, California, Tennessee, and Connecticut. Prior to that, we worked with Washington to do quick build demonstration projects on state-owned routes in these other states as well. Before that, we worked with a whole bunch of cities to do demonstration projects on local roads, and the lessons learned from those projects still inform the work we do today. Next slide. We were invited to bring this model to Maryland in 3 different jurisdictions: the City of Hagerstown, Howard County, and the Town of Bel Air. It was really great to get to work with these 3 communities for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, everybody is awesome, and these were really cool places to get to learn about and just get to know. Second of all, it was really interesting to get to work with a variety of sizes and structures of governments. A town is a lot smaller than a county, and the challenges that they face are different. And then also the support that they can offer each other are different as well. And so getting that range of experiences by working with a range of jurisdiction types allowed us to really observe the strengths and weaknesses of different structures of jurisdictions. Similarly, these three jurisdictions are located in different SHA districts. And so this gave SGA and MDOT the opportunity to work with as many SHA staff and as many different districts as possible. Next slide, please. Here's a little timeline of this project. It was a rapid fire project. We had high expectations and everybody managed to achieve them over this short time frame. So we started off in May with some virtual calls, doing some foundational trainings, and just getting to know the participants, the communities, and picking project sites. And then over the summer, we had a series of in-person workshops, as I mentioned before, one at each community. So we got to go and see Bel Air's challenging intersection. We got to do a walk audit at Hagerstown's project site. And then in August, we actually got to see Howard County's quick build demonstration project in the ground. And throughout this, we were doing trainings on data collection, on design, figuring out the permitting process together, and then learning from each other how to best monitor and collect data to measure the effectiveness of these projects. All of the demonstration projects were removed before the first snow, but they were in place long enough to make sure that with like the school year and the fall schedule, that sort of regular use of the roads got included in the measurement of the effectiveness of these projects. And now I'm going to go over each of the projects and each of the sites. Next slide, please. So first of all, we have Bel Air. Bel Air focused on this five-way intersection at Gordon Street, Main Street, and Bond, which is part of Maryland 924. This intersection is, we've seen some historic imagery of it, and it wasn't built like this in the first place. You know, it evolved to be this confusing five-way intersection over time, and it's also kind of the entrance to their downtown. This intersection also separates a bunch of residential areas from an elementary school, and it's just not comfortable for people to walk across the street because people driving don't know where to go, people crossing don't know where to walk, and nobody really knows where to look out for each other. So to simplify this intersection, this temporary installation used speed cushions to slow drivers down on their approaches into the intersection. They closed the left turn, just removing one of the turning movements to make the options just a bit simpler for folks driving. It narrowed one of the turns, and it added crosswalks and some daylighting to make people crossing the street more visible to folks who are driving cars. As you can see from the data shown in the bottom right here, we did see a speed reduction of 7 miles per hour slower on Main Street and 2 miles per hour slower on Bond Street. At the walk audit for this project site, we saw somebody just driving the wrong way around one of the turns, and that really set the tone for what is the problem we're trying to solve here, and helped really justify turning the left turn into, or closing that one left turn. That's just a little anecdote from that one. Next slide, please. Next, we have Hagerstown, the City of Hagerstown. This project site was US 40, dual highway, and the intersections of Cannon Avenue. So this is a US highway that comes into the historic downtown of Hagerstown, and it kind of splits into a couplet at this point. Because this is the road that we used to drive into the town, to the city at our in-person workshop, and it is a pretty abrupt change from what feels like an interstate to a historic downtown. And that is partially what encourages folks to, or what lets folks feel like they can drive really fast as they're coming into the city. The other issue that this project site was looking to face was that there continued to be a lot of mid-block crossings at this site. This aerial view you can see is actually exactly where folks tend to cross the street right here. It's very far away from a crosswalk on either side of the street. So you'd have to go pretty far out of your way to have to avoid crossing mid-block. And so the challenge here was how do we make crossing safer for people walking across the street without necessarily condoning that they're crossing right here? And so that all kind of led to the central goal of slowing vehicles down as they're entering the city. This was done through adding the flex posts that you can see here to close off the shoulders and shorten some turn lanes. And then at Cannon Avenue, there are some intersections where you could see tire marks over the curb because trucks would take the turn either too fast or too wide. And so adding crosswalks and hardened center lines helped slow down vehicles at those intersections and make it safer for people to cross in the place that they were allowed to cross as well. This had a really dramatic impact on speeds going into town with an 8-mile-per-hour reduction for westbound traffic. Next slide, please. And then last but not least is Howard County. So Howard County project, this was so interesting because the project site that SHA initially proposed was a site that the county had recently done some improvements to, and the county knew that there were places of higher need to focus on instead. And so at the beginning of the project, there was a bit of negotiation, but SHA and MDOT were very willing to move the project site to where the county knew that they needed it more. So the project site was US 1 from Davis Avenue to North Laurel Road. This does not have a, this road does not have a sidewalk, but there are a lot of people who live in this area and who work nearby and who don't have access to a car. So they need to walk to the bus stop that's along this road, or they need to walk or bike to get to and from work. You can see in this top right photo that the grass has been worn away from people walking there. And so the project here was to close an auxiliary lane and turn it into a multi-use path from the start of the auxiliary lane to a signalized intersection where a crosswalk would pick up to go to a sidewalk. The speed reduction wasn't necessarily the goal of this. We did still see a reduction in speeds, but most importantly, surveys and intercept surveys found a much improved feeling of safety and comfort for people walking and biking on this path. This project site was also really cool because it fits into MDOT's pedestrian safety action plan. And so the lessons learned from this project, such as the turning radii for the existing driveways, can be used to inform upcoming projects and upcoming work. Next slide, please. So throughout this project, my team was observing what went well, what was challenging, all for the sake of developing recommendations to write the case studies and final report for MDOT, which you can read online. With all of the projects in the ground at the end of the summer, this program ended up being a huge success. That was just really great to see. As Candice mentioned, my background is in engineering, and the timeline of projects is normally so long that you don't really get to see things happen quite as quickly as you'd hope. And so for us to get to walk on this project at the end of the summer that had only been an idea at the beginning was really inspiring. So what allowed all this to happen? First of all, leadership was absolutely essential. We saw MDOT was in the room all the time. Our folks from headquarters, folks from SHA, they were ready to go with every single session. And everybody was taking responsibility for what they were here to do. The lines of decision-making were clear, and there would be very few moments of looking at each other, not sure who makes what decision, but rather folks would be really eager to step up and say, I can make this decision and we can make this happen. This was in part due to the commitment of everyone in the room to get these projects to happen. There was a real shared commitment to the success of these quick builds. Some of the teams had existing relationships where the county had previously worked with SHA very closely, and so that allowed them to go really far in terms of the scope of their project. And other teams used this as an opportunity to really build those relationships and get to know folks at their district offices that they hadn't been able to work with before. Everyone showed up ready to step outside of their comfort zone, learn something new and try something new. And everyone was really eager to share their success. This was no one person's responsibility, and it was no one person's accomplishment. Everybody was really supportive of each other's work and each other's successes. And what was really exciting to see was that installation of this project was not the last step for anyone. By the end of the projects, folks were brainstorming how this could inform future work, how we can do more of these projects in other places, and what they've learned from this for future full construction projects. Next slide, please. We also observed some challenges along the way and used these sticking points as bases of recommendations for MDOT's future iterations of quick build projects. As with most projects, timing, staffing, and funding are limiting when it comes to the scope. And we think that dedicating more resources or even just lengthening the timeline of these projects could lead to better public engagement and even more creativity in the projects that get put in the ground. Public engagement was a missed opportunity throughout this project due to the timeline and the speed at which the projects had to be selected, designed, and installed. There wasn't the space for the collaborative design that we can see these quick builds do. Temporary installations are a really great way to get more people on board and more people involved with the planning and designing and engineering processes. So that is something that was missing from this one, but that was necessary due to the timeline. And then we also observed a lot of guardrails put up by SHA and MDOT around the locations, design, and materials. Part of this was for the timeline and for ensuring that the projects could get in the ground because they fit within a narrow scope. But because the scope was kind of narrow, that led to a bit of a top-down approach that, again, these quick build projects can be really great for collaborative planning. And so that was just something that we noticed throughout. Next slide, please. So overall, there was a lot to learn from this project. A lot of things went really well that we'd recommend MDOT continue doing, and there were some things that we'd recommend they improve. So developing guidance and processes for future quick build projects can help consolidate the knowledge and streamline the process so that you don't necessarily have to go through a full summer workshop academy to get to do these projects. We'd recommend incorporating community engagement throughout. Again, this is a great opportunity, especially around data collection and design, to just get more folks in on the whole transportation planning thing. We do recommend ongoing training for local districts, local jurisdictions, SHA districts, and the MDOT team, just so that all of the work gets reiterated and it becomes second nature to do a lot of this work. And for more details on our recommendations, please check out our report. Got one last slide just as a thank you, and I look forward to your questions. I will now hand it over to Shane. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ravina, and thank you, Candice and Meg, for having me today. You can go to the next slide. So this Maryland Complete Streets Quick Builds program is building off of what we did last year with Smart Growth America. This program is meant to be for short-term, easily implementable projects that will allow us at SHA to pilot innovative improvements. So I think Ravina got into a lot of these details that are similar from last year's program, but they're very low cost and they have a very quick timeline. We are using these as a way to respond to local needs. So I'll get into more detail into how we chose each location later, but they are all in response to local needs. And they allow us to temporarily evaluate potential improvements. Some treatments will be left in permanently. Some will be removed this year, probably October, November timeframe. And this year's projects are funded, designed, and implemented by SHA, and we are getting local input. Nothing is going in the ground without local stakeholders having a chance to review and comment on what we're doing. Next slide, please. So we have 6 projects throughout the state. I will go into more detail about these. They are, as you can see, spread out throughout the state. We have Dorchester County, Cecil County, Washington County, 2 in Montgomery County, and 1 in Anne Arundel County. This is we are currently designing the concepts for these, but I will go into, if you go to the next slide, I'll go into more detail about each of these locations and why they were chosen. So District 1, this is in Dorchester County, Maryland 14 in Secretary, Maryland. This is just to the northeast of Cambridge, Maryland, at Warwick Elementary School. This corridor of Maryland 14 has a speeding problem that SHA and the town of Secretary have been trying to address. So we're looking at ways we can do that. Some potential ideas we're looking at are speed cushions and crossing improvements. And as I mentioned, we're developing those concepts now and working with the town of Secretary on them. Next slide. In District 2, we're doing a project on Maryland 273 at the Fair Hill Natural Resources Management Area. This area is where the Cecil County Fair and the Maryland 5-Star events are hosted, which have tens of thousands of attendees. Most of those events are held on the south side of this road, and the parking is on the north side. Additionally, there are a lot of DNR trails in this area, so there's really a high amount of pedestrian activity on this road, which has a speed limit of 50 miles an hour and a prevailing speed of higher than that. So we're looking at potential countermeasures like lane narrowing and additional signage to make it a bit safer and make cars more aware of what's ahead. Next slide. In District 3, we have 2 projects. The first is Maryland 410 in Tacoma Park. This is just to the east of Tacoma Park heading into town. This road is, in addition to having high speeds, it's also a fairly narrow road with very narrow sidewalks. So it's uncomfortable for pedestrians and other vulnerable road users. Next slide. Also in District 3 is Maryland 198, just to the west of Burtonsville. This road is where 198 comes into Burtonsville. Just to the right of this picture is an elementary school and a major intersection. And the speed limit drops from west of this location. The speed limit is 45, and as you're going into town, it's 30. So this is a transition area that has a lot of high speeds. Next slide. District 5 in Anne Arundel County. This is Maryland 261 at Rosehaven at Harrington Harbor. This area has a really high amount of pedestrian activity. There's a pool and a marina and a beach, an event center on one side, and parking and stores and restaurants on the other side of the road. You can see in this picture, there's kind of parking everywhere and destinations everywhere. So there's pedestrians everywhere, in addition to speeding cars. And this area has a lot of pedestrian activity also coming to and from as well. Next slide. And then District 6, this is Maryland 30, the intersection of Maryland 34 and 65 in Sharpsburg in Washington County, where 65 and 34 intersect. There is low visibility for cars. There's a new park planned for the bottom left corner in this picture of the intersection, as well as speeding coming into town. There's a hill, a fairly steep hill coming into town. So looking at ways to slow cars down and improve visibility for pedestrians and for cars as well, and just make it a generally safer area for when the park is ready to go. Next slide. So where we are and what our timeline is, we received notice to proceed at the end of April. So we've been working on developing concepts this month and last month. data collection and project design will be finished the latest by the end of this month, and installation will begin in July. Some of these projects, because of where they are, have a tighter timeline. The project in Cecil County needs to be ready before the fair, which is in July. Harrington Harbor is a summer location, so trying to get that ready as soon as possible. And as I think Ravina used the word rapid fire to describe the schedule for this, and I think that's a very appropriate way to describe it. We'll be continuing to monitor the project and collect data throughout the rest of summer and fall, with projects being removed. The elements of projects that are being removed will be removed October, November timeline. Working closely with the districts, meeting every 2 weeks to make sure everything is going the way it should. And then the MDOT in Motion webinar, that is today, announcing everything. We have also launched a Complete Streets Quick Builds website as part of our context-driven program. So all of this information is available there as well. Next slide. I think that's all for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Ravina, for going over our experience from last year's Complete Streets Leadership Academy, and Shane for giving us kind of the path forwards of how we're taking what we learned through our partnership with Smart Growth America, and working with Hagerstown, Bel Air, and Howard County last year to now launch our own round of quick builds. So we've got a number of questions that have come in the chat or in the Q&A box. If you have more questions for our speakers, feel free to put them in now. But I'm going to take them kind of in the order of the project life cycle that I've gotten them in. So I've kind of rearranged them a little bit. So from the very beginning, and this applies, I think, to both Ravina and Shane, when we're going about a quick build project, how are these projects and locations selected? You covered it briefly, but where there are really cross-cutting themes that led to the locations for the quick build projects.
Yeah, I'll jump in for last year's. So last year, SHA came to us with cities and also ideas of project sites in mind. And these were informed by a combination of the known high injury network, upcoming projects. So if there was a project that had a pedestrian safety action plan on that route, that was a higher priority. And then keeping in mind nearby destinations for people walking, such as like the elementary school or the place where folks were walking without a sidewalk to get to work. Those were some of the key factors that informed the project selection for us.
And for this year's projects, we worked closely with the districts to identify locations where there were known problems with pedestrian or vulnerable road user safety. So, the example of Maryland 273 in Cecil County, there's a lot of pedestrian activity there. So it's using this program as an opportunity to address those known safety issues.
Great, thanks. So a combination of data, known issues, and also the opportunity for implementing change. Great. Okay, so the next question, when we are talking about the actual design of the quick builds, it looks like some of the materials used were new to Maryland. What was the process for new materials for quick build projects?
For last year, there were the new materials was something that was really exciting, and that was something that one of our champions in SHA kind of encouraged the approval process to go through really quickly. I can't speak in more detail than that, I'm sorry, but I know that that is something that using these quick build projects and the timeline of these like rapid fire projects was a great way for SHA to be able to move a new material through approval quickly, as well as immediately demonstrate the impacts that these materials can have.
And I would just add that we're looking at these projects as a way to test materials that aren't, speed cushions are a really good example. They're not commonly used in Maryland. They were used last year at last year's Complete Streets Leadership Academy. For a lot of the projects this year, we'll be looking at them as well. And we're looking at this as an opportunity to test how effective they are, and to test things like how difficult they are to maintain, and how drivers will react to them and things like that.
Thanks, Shane. So I'll elaborate a little bit on our products. We do have the SHA evaluates new products. So when there's a new type of modification, a vendor or somebody who's designing a project can submit a request for a new material to be evaluated. So speed cushions, Shane, it's like you read the next question already, because someone said specifically, was there a concern about speed cushions on a major roadway? And did you utilize any specific design criteria for putting a speed cushion on a higher speed roadway?
I would say that there are, design criteria for speed cushions. The really maximum safe speed for a speed cushion is 30 miles per hour. And that was part of project selection was, is this like what can we do in a quick build manner on this road? Is it even possible? So all of our projects were selected with that in mind. And a lot of cases, there are roads that the speed limit is 25 or 30, but that's not the actual speed that cars are going. And so the speed cushion is there to slow them down. I would also add that, as I mentioned, we're using this to test speed cushions. For these projects, speed cushions are going to be one of the treatments that, at least in the short term, will be temporary. So they would all be removed within the next 6 months.
Yeah, just to build on that, Hagerstown was an example of a street where the speed limit was a lot lower than what people were driving. And so the combination of closing the shoulder with flex posts just to like visually narrow the lane, and then adding some warning signs for the speed cushions, and the speed cushions were really effective in slowing speeds. Although we did find out that having two speed cushions next to each other, if there is not a lot of traffic, drivers will just drive in between them sometimes. So that was a lesson learned.
Interesting.
I would just add to that is actually that cars driving in between is something that we're looking at, and we're looking at how to space them and what other materials we need to use to prevent that.
Okay. This one is going maybe a little bit back in the project timeline, but what types of funding sources do we use for the quick build projects?
So for this year, we're using our Complete Streets funds. I can't, maybe Ravina can speak to last year, but this year we're using our set aside Complete Streets funds for this.
And last year, I believe we used all state funds from a number of sources, but we had to kind of scrap together, and it was a huge win that we were able to find the funding for that and then come back for a second round. So good question there.
And then outside of MDOT, our other Complete Streets Leadership Academies are sometimes philanthropically funded, but oftentimes funded by CDC's Active People Healthy Nation program.
Okay, so we've selected our areas. We've looked at all sorts of creative treatments. We're testing new materials. It was mentioned briefly a little bit about community involvement. So what is the process for community input ahead of time for this year's projects, since we learned it was accelerated last year and it was tight? But what is our process for this year's community input for the final design? And then we'll get on into collecting feedback. But for now, Shane, what is happening on the ground for input into design?
Sure. I would say again that like last year, it is a very tight timeline. Every local jurisdiction that these projects are located in are aware that that concepts are being developed, that we're working on projects in these areas. If once the concepts, in a few cases, have reached a point where we're comfortable sharing them more publicly, those concepts have already been shared with the local jurisdictions, and we are getting feedback from them. And then that feedback will continue up until installation. And then we'll be also looking to them for feedback on kind of the effectiveness, how the communities feel about it, and that type of thing.
So, how communities feel about it? This is a really good question from Ian, saying his experience, sometimes safety projects like these, you get community impact. There's a level of trade-off for driver comfort and convenience, but those are key words here, right? That's comfort and convenience versus safety. So we can sometimes have a negative perception of the projects from people who are driving cars. And if we received a lot of negative feedback, how did we handle that with last year's projects?
Yeah, last year's projects, the local teams really led the gathering community feedback once the projects were in place. And a strategy to make sure that all perspectives were being collected was intercept surveys. So a specific example is the Howard County project, which was that multi-use path on the auxiliary lane. And county staff just went out and talked to people who were walking on this path. These are folks who might not have filled out a survey that was posted. They might not have known where to look online, but by talking to them, they got some really good input, some really great testimonies about the impact that this project was having, the positive impact that this project was having on their lives.
Thanks, Ravina. Yeah, that on the ground work done by the local partners and having them be a part of the project was really essential. The other large amount of public feedback I would highlight was in Hagerstown, where this also corresponded with their Safe Streets for All project. So they were surveying across the city about roadway safety. And so a lot of people were talking about the speed cushions in there. And the key with having local staff involved is that they could pick through and see, like, oh, this person is a neighbor to the project and is saying they're so happy it's slower. This person owns one of our biggest shipping companies and has also thanked us for slower speeds. So they were really able to kind of shift through comments that were really about comfort versus people who are most affected by the changes to the roadway, because again, these were people who live in Hagerstown. This is the city engineer who's like, I have heard from everybody in the city about this at this point, and knowing, taking the negative feedback with a grain of salt and looking at, again, like the neighbor who's affected by this a lot more closely, because it's their front yard. Great. So still on the topic of feedback, how do you measure effects of the projects for people walking and biking? And you mentioned briefly the intercept surveys, but what else from last year, and what are our plans for this year, Shane?
Well, last year, in addition to surveys, there were some counts of just counting the number of people walking and biking and the changes that made. Collecting data on people walking and biking is harder. We just don't have as much infrastructure to do that. That's something that a lot of folks just across the world are working on now, and so that's something we will keep improving. I'm very confident with that. Shane?
We are, just echoing that. This year we're working on how we'll be doing pedestrian counts. We're also looking at speeds of vehicles, how these projects are affecting. So we've done before speed studies, and we'll do after speed studies as well, just to see how effective these treatments are.
Yeah, there were some really great data points in the report from last year that Smart Growth America put out. talking about what we achieved in this very short period of time, especially like in Hagerstown with the speed reduction. So getting feedback is great, but getting that data, quantitative sort of element really helps our engineers with future work. So we're looking to sort of bring that forward into the second round too, as much as possible.
Thanks. And then right as we're answering this, there's a question that came in about using smart technologies for quick builds. And I'll say in the topic of measuring effects for people walking and biking, we're actually working with the Morgan State University Smarter Center to look at how we're collecting that. And they have access to a lot of technology for doing counts, having movable counters that have LiDAR, and using some of that technology. But as engineers, Ravina and Shane, are there any other smart technologies that we've considered for quick build projects? I'm not even sure what all is in that bucket of smart technologies.
I'll answer this question by being really old school. My preferred data collection for quick builds is just go sit out and count people. That was, maybe I've got a chip on my shoulder because that was part of my internships in college. But I think it's really effective to just have somebody like spend an hour or two counting how many people are walking out there, especially since technology that has to do with like cell phone tracking, maybe it's only folks who download Strava, or maybe it's only folks with smartphones. And so just making sure that the full picture is getting captured is something that human eyes can do better than smart technology, in my opinion.
And as far as using smart technology as actual treatments in the quick builds, I would say that's not really something that we're looking at. One, the temporary nature of it, and the really quick turnaround. A lot of that technology isn't really, as Ravina said, not really tried and tested yet. And for this, it needs to be something that we could do really quickly, and but that doesn't have a lot of a learning curve for our team here at SHA.
But one thing that Meg and I have been able to experience by doing a lot of the doing here at TSO is working with SHA to figure out what the process is for adding not just new materials, new technologies, and having this framework where we partner with the locals and involve them in the design process at the beginning, and then do these intercept interviews and get feedback. All of that can be used to inform, again, a recommendation or further investigation of technologies. So at one point when we had our context guide first launched, we really made a push to try out innovative treatments as part of our context-driven toolkit. And so we established a framework for evaluating those treatments, whether it's a developer or internally. We want to try something new. What does that look like in terms of the partners internally, design, planning, maintenance, providing some input on what it would take to adopt those treatments, and then finally getting full sign off so that it could be added to whatever official lists we might have. So there are many avenues that various offices might take to evaluate requests that come in, but in terms of complete streets and the quick bills, again, accelerated timeline is the primary focus, but there is an opportunity to discuss innovative treatments and to just talk through how we can start to take a look at that at MDOT.
So we just have 2 more questions to get to and about 6 more minutes. So I think we can do it. All right, we've chosen the location, we've put in the quick build, we've been talking to the community and measuring the success, but then we've mentioned project removal in many cases. So what do we mean by project removal, and what were those exceptions where the project actually stayed in the ground longer than being temporary?
Yeah, so with the projects in 2024, some of the improvements that were made were planned to be permanent, where you're not going to put a crosswalk in and then take it back out if that's where the crosswalk should be anyway. So things like the crosswalks were planned to be permanent. Others, like the speed cushions or a lot of the flex posts that were closing shoulders, weren't really compatible with winter weather. There's uncertainty around how to clear a roadway from snow when there's a speed cushion or when there's flex posts in the road. However, I think the closure of a turn lane, the closure of the left turn in Bel Air, I think that stayed permanent just because the flex posts weren't on the shoulder. And also it's just much simpler with it closed. I will say though, there are a lot of quick builds that we've done in other communities that have just stayed in. In Nashville, there's one that they closed the shoulder and added a mid-block crossing, and those flex posts have just stayed up for years. And that project is going into full construction right about now. There's another one in Lexington from 2018. We were working with Kentucky this year for the 2025 Complete Streets Leadership Academy. And the folks from Lexington are like, oh yeah, that road is still how it was. So the quick build was a bit less temporary than many of them are. So.
And I would just add that you mentioned that speed cushions aren't necessarily compatible with winter weather. For a couple of the projects we're doing this year, we are looking at how incompatible they are and looking at how long we can keep them in and what kind of effects trying to maintain them over the winter would have.
That is so great to hear. Please let me know what you all find out.
Love how much we're learning from all of this. So last and final question. This is also exciting. We're seeing big impacts. How could we get a project like this on a state highway in our own city? Or what could it look like on a local road if a local jurisdiction wanted to do a quick build?
I would say if you want a project on a state road in your jurisdiction, we're not sure what this program will look like next year. We're still working that out, but I am starting to keep track of where these projects might be useful, where they're needed. So you can reach out to me or Candice, and we can add that to the list of potential locations. And if you are for a local jurisdiction who wants to do that, I think I could say that SHA and MDOT are a resource for you on implementing those if you need it.
Yeah, and work with your local city if you want to do a quick build on a local road. Often the speeds will be slower, and you're under different requirements in terms of road design, and that gives you a lot more creativity and flexibility in terms of the materials you can use, the designs you can test, even just like the scope of the project. And so really with local roads, I would say the sky is the limit, which I don't think that's too optimistic. I think that's really leaning in on the creativity that we can see in these projects, because there really is so much that you can try to do with a local roadway, and so many different ways that you can do a temporary project to test it out.
And I might just add that one key benefit of this sort of program where we're not just delivering projects quickly, but we're delivering them innovatively, and we can get a lot of data from it. So SGA produced Smart Growth America included 3 great case studies at the end of the final report from round 1. Any data that local jurisdictions has that supports, innovative treatments or safety countermeasures, we would love to see that. I mean, I can definitely be a contact if you'd like to reach out to me. I can find a way to drop my contact in the chat, but we want that data. And the data that was produced from round 1 is very good. It tells us exactly what a new material did to slow speeds down. And we can use that to justify future work. So please share with us. We'll continue to share in the form of case studies, and hope that we can continue this as a program for round 3.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining. Be the change you want to see. Thank you to our speakers, Ravina and Shane, for sharing the experience from last year and how we're moving forward. MDOT in Motion, again, is a monthly webinar series. Our next webinar will be on July 3rd, focusing on micromobility in Maryland. So both personally owned e-scooters and e-bikes, as well as shared fleets. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, if you want to keep track of our calendar, please go to mdot.maryland.gov/bikeped. Thank you all for joining.